Hi there. So, over the past couple of weeks, I've got a bunch of questions about how I move, tricks on different birds, that sort of thing. And I just kind of wanted to make a video to help all the newer players and the people who, don't have as much of a clue as to move around more efficiently. So obviously the game works as WASD. The W and S work based on where you're looking. So if you're looking up, then your W will go up, your S will go down. Same thing with down, the W will go down, S will go up. And you kind of want to keep in mind that when moving around, you always want to be holding W for most cases. There's very few times where holding W is like not a good thing to do, such as like if you're about to land on a nest. Like if I'm super high up and I dive towards a nest, holding W is just going to get me stunned, right? You're going to be left vulnerable, people are going to be able to kill you, it's not going to be a fun time. In similar cases like that, like running into terrain, if you start holding S, then you slow down before you hit the terrain, and you get stunned on it way less. So basic movement is kind of getting around using the dash, which is on the shift. It's called a barrel roll as well. I normally just call it the dash. It's a lot quicker. It's this like burst of movement that you can get, right? So the way it works is based on whatever direction you're holding, it will dash you in that direction. And most of the time, you'll be getting the most value out of it, like the most distance, if you just do it while holding W and looking in that direction. So if you see, for example, if I'm like not holding any movement buttons and I just shift, I don't go very far, right? But if I go back to where I was and I start holding W and I shift, I start gliding. I start carrying this momentum and I can gain a lot more speed. So it's really useful to be able to hold W and shift. And another big thing is a lot of players just dash up and then start flying down to get this glide where you see the wing trails there. But something interesting you can actually do is you can start by dashing down and then you get this glide and you wait for your dash to come off cooldown and you dash up and you keep the glide going. So you get a lot more like horizontal distance a lot quicker. Another thing that you just saw me do there is just dash directly off of nest. So I'm going to do a little comparison here. If I steal this egg and I just fly up and try to fly away, look how long it takes for me to get that glide. Now, if you compare it to, let's say, dashing off of the steal, look how much faster I can get out of it. The longer you stay around the nest, the more time it gives the defending birds to be able to hit you, lock onto you, use their abilities against you, whatever. For example, like I normally play Eagle quite a bit. If someone's on my nest, I can just like, let's say I'm flying up here, I can easily just go down and hit them. So if they're being slow around the nest, it's a lot easier for me to hit them compared to just them, taking the egg, flying out. Because now I have to react a lot quicker if I'm on the defending side of things. Most of the time, like I see some people do like diagonal, like let's say I hold W and A, for example. The dash doesn't really do too much for you by doing it diagonal. You really have to be careful about what keys you're inputting when you are doing a dash, because you're going to be getting a lot of value out of holding W and doing it. There are some cases where like a bird's coming at you, you can do a quick barrel roll to the side and you can use it to kind of surprise them, dodge out of the way, which it can be useful for. But for moving around the map more efficiently, you should just mainly be holding W while, dashing. Because then I can get all the way around, I can get there very quickly, and I keep that glide almost the entire time. Especially going up vertically like that, like I just covered so much vertical space. One tip that I see not very utilized is when gaining a lot of vertical space. Obviously it can be pretty easy with the Eagle because you have the queue that can go up like this, but your dash can actually be used a lot more effectively. I want to show you how much vertical space I get in a very short amount of time just by holding W while looking up and then dashing. I got to the top of this beam from the nest in a decently short amount of time. So what I'm doing here is I'm just free camming. I'm doing the free look, which if you don't know can be found in, I believe it's input and it is right here, free look. It's default on all. Another kind of nice piece of tech that I like quite a bit, I call it the super reverse. It's just a fun way to break people's ankles, right? So there's two ways to do this, the super reverse. I prefer to do it with free look because I can see what's happening behind me and I know what I'm getting into. But I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison, one with free look and one without free look, to kind of show you the difference because they are fairly similar. So as you can see, they're both pretty similar. It's just a little more risky to do the no free look option because you can't see where you're going. If you're just relying on looking on your mini-map to see where enemies are, you could not get like a completely accurate depiction of where they are. So I just prefer to be free looking, and just utilizing this button in general is very nice. I've talked to a couple of new players and taught them the ropes, and they didn't even know that this was a thing. But in a game like this, where it's very, fast-paced combat, three-dimensional, there's a lot of things going on, I find it very helpful to be, fighting, whatever, and I can get out and instantly see if anyone's following me or what abilities are being used, so I can potentially come back in, go in for a dive and go back into the fight. So that kind of wraps up the basis for, basic movement. You should be utilizing the training tool to get used to just flying around the maps, going from nest to nest, and seeing how fast you can do it, only using a couple dashes. And try just using dash off cooldown and seeing how it feels. A lot of players are just kind of scared, I guess, to use their dash off cooldown because it feels like such an important tool. And it really is, but the most important use case I can find for it is moving around the map and gaining that glide to get the wing trails, because you start gaining a lot of speed over people who are just flying around. So now we're on to the bird specific tips. So I'm actually just going to go through the line as you see it on this bird selection screen. So we're going to start with crow, go down the list, and end with seagull. And I'll have timestamps in the description if you just want to skip to the bird that you play the most, or if there's a bird that you want to learn. You don't have to go through all of them, right? So crow is meant to be more of an assassin type character. It has 200 HP, it's a mid-sized bird, so it's not the hardest thing to hit, but it's not also as easy to hit as something like the shoebill, and it's all about its unique bleed effect that it has. So before we get to that, I'm going to start with its abilities. So its Q is this cloak, where you kind of have this dot effect. As you can see, it's not completely invisible, so people, if they can guess where you're going, are able to track you and they can try to find you, but it's not as easy as just, flying around normal. Especially up against flat colors and bright colors like the sky, if you go invis, it is easier to see you. So just be mindful of that when positioning when you're in your invis around other birds, because I've seen some birds just fly up invis and you can still obviously see where they are. Before we get into combos, I'm just going to go over its right click a little bit. So this is a charged ability where you hold it down and you do a little dash towards a bird, and it does some damage, but it also procs its bleed effect. So bleed happens in two cases with the crow. On the right click, like you just saw, and when you do a basic attack, which is just your left click out of your invis. And bleed every single time is 3 ticks of 10 damage. This doesn't stack, so I can't do my basic and then do my right click and have both instances of bleed happening at the same time, but you can chain them if you time them correctly. So something that a lot of good crows do is you invis and you go in, and then you use your charged right click to proc the bleed, and then you just keep fighting like that, and it does a decent amount of damage, right? A lot of good crows use their right click out of the cloak because it's harder to charge up the ability to get the most damage out of it in the middle of a fight, because as you're charging it, right, you're standing still. So if you're able to fly in and then hit them through the cloak, you use your right click, it's a lot less predictable, and it's harder for them to notice that you're even there before the ability has gone off and now they're bleeding, right? It is technically better to, since your second instance of bleed only happens when you basic attack out of a cloak, there is technically a better combo to start combat, which is based on your basic attack in your cloak, because the second instance of bleed is only when you hit a basic attack out of your cloak. So what you want to do is you want to cloak and fly in and basic attack to proc the bleed, and then you hit your second bleed through your right click. So there I didn't time it well, I only got 5 ticks of bleed, but you get the point, because now it's 2 more right click, or 2 more basic attacks and they're dead. Crow has a lot of mind games. A lot of bad crows use their invis to just fly onto nest, take an egg, and try to go away. So a lot of players predict what crows are going to do, but as soon as they see a crow go invis, they'll just fly to the nest and start attacking it, or they'll waste cooldowns like an eagle dive, for example. So what you can do is kind of condition the other players to... You can even start off by just doing the basic invis, fly onto nest, and then maybe get away. But what you can also do later in the game, or if they seem like more experienced players, is you can invis and just like stand still or fly in a different direction. And if they're not tracking you, they're going to assume that you're on nest, so they'll fly to the nest, waste cooldowns trying to kill you, and you won't even be there. And then you can kind of follow that assassin archetype by coming in, using your right click to bleed, and just mowing them down, right? A lot of crow players, kind of like what I was just going over, expect the enemy player to just completely ignore them and not be able to see them when you're invisible. But since there is that prediction aspect and the fact that you can still kind of see the birds, it's helpful when you're playing as a crow to always expect that they can see where you are. The minimap is a great asset that a lot of players don't even look at during the game, but it's nice because you can see what direction someone's looking in, so you can see if their arrow is turning towards you or when they're, looking away from you, for example, even when they aren't in your field of view. Because I'm looking this way, I can see if the bird behind me, which is just this training owl, is potentially chasing me or just is going to go back to its nest to defend. So you can calculate, is it worth going back in with the cooldowns that I have remaining, or should I just leave and try to get a neutral egg or go to a different nest or even defend your own? One last thing for crow is the kill streaks. So one kill streak in particular is very strong on the crow, and that's the minimap jamming kill streak. So the way the kill streak works is when you activate it, their minimap goes fuzzy and blurry and they can't actually see any icons or anything like that on their minimap. And you can use that to really distract people and make them realize you're not even there. A lot of good players are looking at their minimap. So if I'm looking to go for this crow, it can see me because on my minimap I can see it. So even if I invis here, it's gonna know that I'm coming because they saw me on my minimap. A lot of good players are constantly looking at the minimap to be able to see what their surroundings are like at a quick glance, and to see, for example, if they're defending, if anyone's coming, from what direction, all of that information. So if you're able to jam their minimap, they no longer have access to that information. You can also use it on defense by hiding behind terrain when they come to steal an egg, and then you can cloak and approach them. They won't even see you coming, and then you can, boom, hit them with the bleed, and you get the stealth damage amplifier. For bird-specific information, a 3-click combo and a right-click just kills a hummingbird. So if you're able to get 1, 2, and then maybe your right click off, and then you can hit your auto, you're guaranteed to kill the hummingbird, unless it flies away and starts regenning, or there's a Shoebill that causes it to heal. The last thing I'm going to go over is the fact that bleed actually goes through armor. So it doesn't use up the armor, but it does the same amount of damage, even if they have armor. Because I'll talk about it later on, armor is essentially 30% damage reduction. So you take 30% of the damage you would do to them, and then you get rid of that. They only take 70%. But the bleed goes through that. So if I do my basic attack, you see the bleed ticks still do 10 damage, but the armor actually doesn't go down. It kind of just shifts down the line of their health bar. So you need to know that when fighting against birds like the Shoebill or the Eagle that have armor, because if you're trying to get rid of their armor, you can't use your bleed to do that. You'll have to do it by attacking them normally or by using your right click. And it doesn't just work with the bleed as you think it might. It's a little counterintuitive. Next up is the Hummingbird, and this is supposed to be that sort of fast-paced, in-your-face, like annoying style. And the kit really accentuates that, but right now it's actually kind of in a bad spot. It doesn't have a ton of health. Obviously, it's kind of supposed to be a glass cannon, but its damage also doesn't really, support that playstyle as well. So, you know, each basic attack, you can hold it down, and it kind of has this heat meter. So as you hold it down, it increases, and then it goes down once you go to the top, and it has that little, like, puff sound, that little heat sound playing. So, the Q is a kind of flurry rush, where you start moving around, and you hit people in these little dashes. And a cool thing about this is you can actually move around while doing it. And so you can use it to dodge if people are going to try to come to you. They can, you know, if they're flying towards you, you can Q it, and it makes it harder for you to hit while getting away. The right click is fairly similar to the crow, where it's a charge up dash, but as you can see, it does a little more damage. It doesn't have the bleed effect that the crow does. That's kind of unique to the crow. And the dash itself is faster, longer range, and overall it's more, you know, mobility based, which is kind of the whole MO for this bird, right? This bird can definitely be annoying if played by good people. Yeah, this bird overall, I like it. I don't play it too much just because it's not my style. But it's also a pretty good pick for, you know, average players, intermediate players, that sort of. Here we have the Pigeon. Now, this is kind of more of a support bird as I've been playing it, but it does have its uses offensively and defensively. To start off, it does have 250 HP, and it is a mid-sized bird, so it is, like, not the easiest thing to hit, but it's also not like a hummingbird where it's small and it's really hard to hit. Its Q is this large radius UAV, as they call it, and it does 1 tick of damage for every bird that it hits. It's pretty useful for if people are, let's say you're defending your nest, and people are flying in taking your eggs, you can use it, and since it does do the tick of damage, if they're carrying an egg, they drop it, because as you may not know, if you're holding an egg and you take any amount of damage, you will instantly drop the egg. It's also pretty useful offensively, because if you also don't know, if you are regenning your HP and you take damage, it stops the regen. So if I'm in a fight with this owl, for example, and I get it pretty low, and it starts to regenerate its HP, which is right now, if I use my Q, it stops that regen. So you can use it in fights, and if you need to kind of back out and wait for the fight to resume because you're waiting on cooldowns, you can use your Q so that you can continue regenning, unless they hit you obviously, but your Q can then stop their regen. So it's that little bit of an upper hand. Now, the right click for the Pigeon is a chargeable projectile ability that doesn't move the bird. So as you, let's say I tap it, it does 22 damage. And this is kind of an AoE thing, it's about a cone, so you can hit multiple people with it. And I'm going to charge it up here, so you can see it does do more damage. It does pretty significantly more damage, but the downside is you have to be sitting there charging the ability. So it's all about timing, right? Like a lot of these charged abilities, there's the downside of charging it up, it gives you more damage or more movement or whatever, but it means that you're standing still for longer, so it's easier for someone to potentially hit you back. The rest of the bird is pretty average. I actually find this bird to be quite boring, which is unfortunate because it does have a lot of utility. It's just not that fun to play. This bird is useful if you're a beginner. It doesn't really have a high skill ceiling because it's right click, it's easy to aim, it's Q, you don't need to aim at all, it's just about being close to somebody else. So it's not that fun to play continuously as well, and that's why I don't really touch this bird that much. So here up next we have the Shoebill, and this is meant to be a more tanky and defensive bird. As you can see in the bottom left of my corner, there are these little squares of yellow health. I call it armor, I've heard some people just call it yellow health, it means the same thing. And this health actually has a 30% damage reduction onto it. So as you can see, if I hit with an auto, it'll do 42. And then if I do this, 57, so now that it's just the regular health, it actually does 60 damage. And an important thing to keep track of is that when you start to regen health, the armor actually regens first. So as you can see, as its health goes up, it actually starts with the yellow health, or the armor, whatever you want to call it. So this bird is meant to be more of a tanky defensive bird, and its kit really does reflect that. Its Q is this large radius healing aura that gives it base healing of 50 health, and then starts the regen effect right away. So an important thing to note when casting this ability is you want to be very selfless about it, right? If your teammates are pretty low, they're probably playing birds that have less HP, so you want to be making sure that they are staying healthy. Another thing to note is that because the healing over time is actually regen, if someone gets damaged, it'll stop the regen. So if you do this in the middle of a fight where you still have a chance to be taking damage, then it's not as effective as doing it once a lot of people are dead or when people are starting to fly towards you, because you'll be taking damage and the healing will not be as effective. It's on quite a long cooldown, so you need to be able to learn when to use it properly. I just went over a couple examples earlier on when a good time is to cast it. And next up is the right click. So this is a charging ability that knocks birds back and stuns them if they hit terrain. So as you can see, you can charge it up, and it does more damage and dashes you in a direction based on how much you held it down for. So if I just tap it, it does 12 damage, but as you saw before, it did 42 on the full charge. But the distance they fly is actually the same. A nice tip to use with this ability is to, most of the time, you're gonna kind of be like fighting around areas such as this where the nest has a lot of flat ground, but the area itself, walls aren't guaranteed to be around you. For example, this whole side is open and your right click isn't going to be able to get them into these walls and stun them. So what you want to actually be doing is stunning people downwards. So they're more guaranteed if they're flying at this height to hit the ground and get stunned, and you can start attacking them. In the bottom left above my health, there's a bar that has a heavy and then 0% next to it. So this is something that the Shoebill has called the heavy attack. So as you do attacks, it'll charge that bar up, and then your next attack will do an increased amount of damage. Shoebill is all about patience. It's not like a crow or a hummingbird where you dump cooldowns, kill things fast. It's more of a bird where you need to be keeping track of things like your cooldowns so you can be healing and doing the stun, and your heavy attacks so you know when you're going to be getting a nice burst of damage, because the extra damage can be just enough to actually give you an upper hand, especially against other birds with armor like eagles or shoebills, because it'll wipe out most of their armor, right? And it'll be able to be doing more damage more consistently, and you don't need to be worrying about that armor anymore. That's kind of it for this bird. It's a pretty strong bird. I like it. I just don't play it because it's not really my play style. Next up we have the eagle, which is actually my main bird. So this bird is all about movement. It's all about grabbing people using the dive, which I'll show you in a second. And it's just all about kind of being all over the place, being fast, and getting in and out and doing a decent bit of damage. So right now, the bird, we have a nice little hummingbird here. The Q is, I press it, and there's this short little animation, and then you fly up. And this actually works in a similar way to that vertical dash before that I showed you, where if you hold up and Q, you can get a lot more vertical distance than just doing it looking straight, right? So you see how high up I just got? Its second ability, its right click, is a dive. So the way it works is it does a scream as an audio cue, and then it dives you down in the direction that you're looking. And then it has this charge meter, which will increase faster if you're looking straight down, and will increase slower if you're looking horizontally. And the idea is you dive towards a target, and then you hit them towards terrain, and they get stunned, and then you can attack them. And this is actually pretty good. A lot of birds, because essentially if you right click them right next to them, it doesn't actually do anything except knock them back. You need to build charge up to be able to actually grab onto them during the dive and hit them into terrain and do whatever. So a lot of eagles that I see like to just fly up super high. You know, they pop their Q, they pop their dash, and then they dive from here. Now, this isn't really a bad thing against most new players, but a lot of people will learn to you know, be looking up when you fly up, or even following you up. And it can be quite annoying as an eagle player to try to deal with that, because better players can use the things like the vertical dash to be able to follow you, and they'll still not be in the range for your dive to grab them, and they can actually just kill you now that you've used your Q, your dash, and they have no downside to doing that. So what I like to do instead is a nice little combo where I'll show you in a second. I dash away, I Q, and then before my Q is actually finished, I dive in the middle of it. So I'll show you what it's like on the Seagull here. So we dash, Q, and then in the middle I hit my dive. And so a lot of people don't expect, that's funny, a lot of people don't expect the dive to happen right in the middle of the queue, because not a lot of eagles do this, right? A lot of eagles, they wait for the whole queue to go, then they fly around, they maybe dash, and then they go for this, which isn't bad. It's a nice little mix-up, and it's good to be able to do that with your character. It's way better than what I've seen a lot of beginner eagles do, which is literally just dash up, queue up, get really high, and then dive down. Another thing about that is it's a lot harder to hit birds if you're super high up, because obviously if you're higher up, you're aiming for them, they're going to be a smaller target, and you don't need to do that, because if he starts moving to the side, I'll kind of show you by making this guy strafe. So if he starts strafing and I start going up super high to do my dash, it's going to be a lot harder to hit him, right? I kind of have to track him, which I can do decently well. But it's really hard to track him while you're doing it high up. And a way better way to do it is to do my little combo that I showed you, because you're coming at it from a horizontal angle. And I'll show you a little diagram here. Essentially, when you're high up, right, it's going to be harder to readjust your aiming so that you meet them where they are moving, because you don't want to dive to where they are, you want to dive to where they're also flying, so you can hit them and meet them at that point. If you're doing it from an angle like what I do with my combo, you're going to be able to readjust your aiming a lot more consistently, and it's going to be easier against horizontal movement, which a lot of birds are doing, because it's super easy to do in this game. It's very quick. That's how a lot of birds get around. So just to show you one more time with my combo, if this guy starts strafing like this, let me just reset him. So let's say it's a Shoebill like this, right? What I can do is I can do Q, do this, and then I can go for the dive. One more thing about the eagle that I kind of talked about earlier is when you use your dash right against somebody, and all it does is knock them back. But this isn't really a bad thing, right? Because a lot of times if you're defending, like if I'm just at this level and someone comes in, if I am hitting them with this, it knocks them off of the nest, and it knocks them away so they can't accidentally like pick up an egg and still get away, even though I've already used an ability on them. So it's not always beneficial to, if they're on the nest, go up and then go down like this to grab them. It's sometimes better to just do the dash or do the dive onto them so you can knock them up, and then use your other abilities like your basic attacks to kill them afterwards. It helps for stalling for time as well, because it, you know, keeps them away, it keeps them moving, and it doesn't just keep them in one place, which I've accidentally stunned people on nest, and then something happens, like their teammate comes, and now I'm dead, and they get 2 eggs. So it might be better to just dive in, knock them back, and now you're still up in the air fighting them. So even if his second teammate comes, I have things like my Q to get away, and I can even dash back in now, or I can just try to get away and wait for my teammates to come. Next up is the owl. Now, I used to play the owl quite a bit. I think it's a really cool and interesting bird. So this has 175 HP. It can be used offensive and defensively as well. I like it for both use cases, and I'm going to show you why. So the Q is this AoE blind, and from their perspective, it is this sort of misty fog, kind of like the blind in Minecraft, where they can only see short range, and you can actually get away pretty easily while they're blinded, and they can't really tell where you went. So it's really useful to just hit and then get away, or even sometimes what I do is I blind them right when I start into the fight. So I dash in or I teleport in and I blind them, and then now they're kind of clueless and stunned and shocked as to what happened, and I could potentially go into their nest, or I could just kill them and then do whatever. And speaking of teleport, that's actually the owl's secondary ability. So as you can see, you can hold it down and you get this little indicator of where you're going to teleport to. So this sphere, as you can see, locks on to birds with a little bit, it's kind of like aim assist. And when you let go, let's say I teleport over here, when you let go, it has this little cooldown, and then you teleport. So it's useful for mobility, obviously, because you can teleport. Let's say I'm defending the nest and my teammate comes, I can use the teleport to just get off of nest really easily and then dash away. Or I can use it when I'm potentially losing a fight, I can just teleport away. And it's really hard for the people to track me where I'm going, because there's not really an indicator of where I'm going to, right? especially if I hit a blind and then I TP away, all they're going to see is me standing there and then I'm gone, because they have that short sight. They have the short vision. And you can actually use the teleport in kind of a variation of the super reverse that I talked about earlier, where let's say I'm going through here and I'm diving. I can free cam and TP away, and then they can't actually see that I was looking behind me and I teleported back. So you can use it to break people's ankles, you can use it to just dodge a chase, you can use it in so many different use cases. One extra use case that I don't see people using about a ton is TPing directly on top of people during fights. So if I teleport on someone, it actually does 100 damage, which is quite a bit of damage, especially because it's on a 12-second cooldown. And what you can do is you can actually time this with your basic attack, right? You're just left click. And so you can TP and then instantly attack, and you get like 149. I've seen 160. You can actually do a pretty good job with it, and then you could even follow that up with a blind and then going away. So you can get a lot of damage on people very quickly. It's also pretty useful for securing kills. So let's say the Shoebill is pretty low. I can actually TP onto him and just kill him. So he was starting to regen there. He was at about a third of his HP, and I was able to knock him out just by doing a TP and a couple of basic attacks, right? So it can be useful offensively and defensively. You know, I'm going to be saying this quite a bit because a lot of people don't realize that birds have applications in both cases. Like I even mentioned earlier with Shoebill, you can use it in both. It's just for newer players, I wouldn't completely recommend that. Now, the last bird that we're going to be talking about is the only other bird that's actually in the game right now, and that's the Seagull. And the Seagull's got quite an interesting kit. So its Q is this sort of AoE cone that does damage, and it's really nice for, you know, dealing damage to a group of people if they're on a nest, for example. A lot of fights in this game do happen around these points of interest, such as nests or neutral eggs, or even on high-rise, some of the cranes. They can be super useful if people are starting to get damage dealt to them, they are starting to get low. What you can do is you can just hit them with a Q, and then it stops their regen as well because they're taking damage. The right click is probably my favorite part of the Seagull's kit, which is a poop. So you can, essentially what you do is when you right click, it's a projectile that does, you have to lead it if they are moving, so it can be difficult to hit. And it slows them and does a little bit of damage to them. So you can use this if someone's running away from you. If someone took an egg, you can right click them and they're slowed, so you can catch up to them way easier and just hit them with a barrage of your basic attacks. You know, if someone's flying up to your nest, they want to take an egg or whatever, you can just go up to them, hit them with a right click, and it slows them down and makes them a lot easier to follow. You do have 2 charges of this, so don't be completely scared to use it, because it can be pretty useful in most cases. I would say if you're able to hit the right click, there's not really a situation where it's wrong to use it, because you actually get a lot of value out of it. It slows, it does damage, it can do quite a bit. Where the Seagull really shines is its basic attacks and another kind of hidden ability it has called Chip Frenzy. So in the bottom left of my screen, there's this chip bar, which is currently at 0%. And every hit that you do increases it. And once it hits the 100, a red aura starts to form around my bird, and I start to auto attack faster. So as you can see there, it ends up being quite a bit faster than the regular. So what you want to be doing is staying on people by slowing them or by queuing them, and then just hitting them with your auto attacks or your basic attacks, right? But I really urge players, once they unlock things like the Eagle and the Owl, to give them a shot because they are pretty underrated. The Eagle's in a really strong state right now because the grab is pretty buggy, and the Owl is pretty underrated. I like the Owl quite a bit. I think its kit is one of the most unique in this game right now, and it's really fun to play. It's one of the more fun birds to use, and it has a lot of movement options with the teleport, like comboing it with a blind like we went over before. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you subscribe. I'll be posting more guides and montages in the future. I have a lot of fun playing this game. I hope you guys do too, and I hope you guys learned something from this video.